Hello, welcome back. Back from vacation. There's lots to cover today. I'm very excited, but I may have gotten carried away. There's a lot to cover in today's session. Um, as you all know, the background to this is the book launch coming up shortly. Leadership Intelligence Handbook, 196 ready to use strategies explained in an easy format. So it gives you the context, some insights, and how to practice a new intelligence, if you like, a new implementation to improve leadership. Brings up a really interesting question that I get asked sometimes, and that is, why do we have this as leadership intelligence, but all our information that we have, all our logos, all our branding is behavior intelligence? And I'll explain that very briefly. And I was having this conversation with a coach last year, and the explanation is really this: leadership intelligence is the outcome. It's what leaders want to become. They want to be a better leader. So to be a better leader, first you need to be intelligent about what it is to be a better leader. And it starts in the book. Part one of the book was all about the self-awareness. Part two of the book is, how do I become better leader? And that's where behavior intelligence comes in. So behavior intelligence is the method that you need to understand and embrace. And part two, which is today's, one of those chapters is today. We started that last, before I went on vacation. And so behavior intelligence is really that methodology to do that. But you need tools. So part three, when we get to that, and part two is pretty large, so we will spend a few weeks on that. And part three, we'll get into the tools. We'll talk about Acumatch. We'll talk about some of the techniques and so forth. And then part four brings it all together. So do stay with us on this journey. I know I'm covering a lot of stuff on these sessions, and I make no excuse about that. In fact, let me just make sure I am on screen and that everyone can hear me. So do give me a bit of a thumbs up in the chat, just so that I know things are working properly. As I was saying, these sessions, there's a lot of data. If you like, what I've done is I've taken a chapter from the book that we would usually run as a half-day workshop or minimum 2 to 4 hour workshop. So there's a lot of exercises, a lot of things that happen in that. And what we've done for these sessions is taken the slides from those workshops and actually given it as a brief presentation. So I get through it fairly quickly. But if you're interested to participate in one of those workshops, or you want to run one of those in your organization or with your clients, if you're a coach, do reach out, do let me know, and we can help you with that. So great. Thank you. We're live. We're good to go. Let me jump into the presentation because there's a lot to cover. Today's slides, I've got 42 slides, so I better stop yakking and get on with it. All right. So make sure my clicker is working. There we go. So a quick review. Part two. Week one was about the observation part of behavior intelligence. So we dove into a little bit more information about, separating facts from opinions, judgments, and so forth. Do go back and watch that if you missed it. Today we're going to be looking more at moving from seeing to understanding the patterns, but to architect and implement new patterns, new habits in your organization. So that's why there's a lot to cover today, because this is quite a detailed explanation of that. All right. So the typical problem is 95% of change, great intentions, but they fail. And they fail because people tend to treat the symptoms, not the cause. They don't get to the root of it. They don't have a technique and a methodology to help them do that, right? So when we start to understand that nobody is able to read your mind, okay, so you can have the greatest intention, you want to change, you want to make transformation in your organization, you want to improve, but the only thing people have to work with is your behavior. And when we bring this into leadership intelligence and we start looking at other people's behavior, we can start to see patterns, okay? And so we'll talk about those patterns, those cues, and we'll talk about the steps to do that, the process of doing that. So, behavior is learned. We're not born with these behaviors, okay? We're not born with the intentions. We learn those intentions, and then we test out different behaviors to see which ones get rewarded, which ones get the outcome that we want. And often the wrong behaviors get you the wrong results. So every behavior now, when we talk about organizations, we're not talking about just your behavior or an individual's behavior. We're really referring to the culture, the group think, the group behavior, the patterns that show up with individuals, but also within the organization. When we talk about performance and performance reviews in the coming sessions, those are also important things to remember about that. Where this comes from and why it's called behavior intelligence is really from the neuroscience and psychology and the work that we did in researching all of this to build Acumatch and the behavior intelligence methodology. And this journey, started for me more than a decade ago. I think most of you know that it was probably about 25 years ago that I started building a lot of these tools, and we only just launched them in the last decade. So the thing is, in the early 1900s, we shifted from the 1800s, where behaviorism was the key focus in therapy, to cognitive psychology, which was more to do with how we think, how we act, and that's where psychology came into play. In the last 20 years, we've seen the shift, and I wasn't really part of that program. I was separate from that. But I saw the shift happening, and now we see this actually taking place in all universities now. Focus on cognitive behavior psychology, cognitive behavior therapy, cognitive behavior coaching. So we've moved into the journey that happened is what we tend to do as human beings is throw away all the old stuff because we got something new and exciting. So we threw away behaviorism and we shifted to cognitive psychology. And now we've realized, oh shit, actually that was probably pretty valuable stuff because we can't read minds. We only communicate through behavior, right? So problematic behavior in the team shows up when it's triggered. So this is now the principle of how we recognize patterns in order to change them. You can't change something that you can't document, you can't recognize and identify. First, you need to identify it, and before you can actually act on it, you need to recognize what triggers that pattern. So when we talk about the habit loop, we're talking about trigger, pattern, outcome, or reward. All right. So when we're dealing with past conditioning, we tend to talk about trigger, pattern, reward. That's what's being rewarded, and that's what gets reinforced. When we're doing transformation, we're looking at the outcome that we want to have. Okay, so that's the distinction. You'll see me talking about both of those different times. So it's a 3-step process. It's not very complicated. Basically, the first thing you need to do is identify the trigger. Is it time of the day? Do people panic as soon as it's 8:30 because they got to start work? Is there an emotional state? What was the trigger around those things? Why does someone show up late to the meetings all the time, right? So then you can't read minds, so all you have is the ability to observe what happens. And I see this in career advancement, in performance reviews. It gets misused so much because leaders observe people and what they're doing, and they see patterns, and they go, oh, this person seems to do that really well. Why don't I give him more of that, right? And so we tend to box people because of what we've observed them doing, not what we understand them to be capable of achieving. So that's a difference, and we'll talk about that in future sessions as well. So uncover the outcome or the reward in this case. So when you're looking at these things, what is it that causes that person or the group to continue that pattern? Is it something that they achieve? And when we achieve something, that's a reward. It's a dopamine hit. And when we get that, our brain says, oh, this was good. I need to keep doing that, right? When we are looking at these, we want to, just come back to that a little bit and just make sure that we're covering it properly. There is a trigger, there's a pattern, and there's an outcome. And the outcome could be a reward or the change that you want to achieve, right? So maybe tight deadlines cause people to panic, go into firefighting mode, right? Which then the outcome could be quality suffers. When you have unclear roles, you end up with conflict. That's my role, and all of that unnecessary conflict that causes delay or causes things to get dropped. The gaps, right? If that wasn't my responsibility, that's the opposite to mine, right? And we see that in certain situations. In fact, I can give you lots of great examples, and we do that in the workshops. So I'm not going to go into that today. So feedback. People don't get some reward, some feedback, positive or negative. It doesn't matter what it is. They'll get disengaged, and you end up with high turnover. So if you have high turnover, that's the outcome. You might want to look back at the pattern and the triggers for that pattern. And again, those are things that we dive into a little bit more in the workshops. So your advantage as a leader is you can see these things, and you're already doing the predicting situations, predicting how people are going to respond. I've had people on my team that, I've lost sleep over presentation the next day because I know there's this one person that's just going to kibosh it and have challenges. So my brain is predicting all of the negative things that could come out of that. When I learned that, then we got into the pattern discussion, and that's where some of this came from. So recognizing that pattern, discussing that pattern, creating the interrupts to change that pattern is what this session today is about. So your advantage is, as a leader, you really need to be honed in, not doing stuff, but leading people is about recognizing these behavior patterns and recognizing different ways to transform the organization, create greater success, get results through people, right? Okay, that's what leadership is. You're leading a ship, if you like. Okay, and within that are tasks that need to be performed in every function on the ship. And some people will do it well automatically, unconsciously, and some people will struggle with that. And if you want to make those changes, you have to be able to interrupt their failing patterns, right? So what you need to do first is map the pattern that's occurring. If you, like I said before, in anything, if you can't measure it, if you can't document it, you can't change it. It's the brain, doesn't deal well with abstract vagueness. It likes specificity. And that's why, again, Acumatch gives us the specificity, and we'll talk about that. All right. Identify the warning signs that are going to be the triggers to those patterns. So, yeah, this is the pattern that occurs. This guy constantly negative. And I know from the night before, because I'm losing sleep over it, that this is going to occur. So identifying the things that have occurred in the past that I've done in that situation that caused that pattern to show up, okay? Then we design a circuit breaker, right? And what's a circuit breaker? In psychology, it's a pattern interrupt, and we will talk about the pattern interrupt. So, there's lots of ways to do that. These are some examples. I'm not going to read all the slides to you. You can read them for yourselves. Then the fourth stage, and this is, you're going to talk about at the end of this session, this is actually something you can do as a 4-week cycle, right? If you take one pattern each month, you can make a lot of change in your organization in just a year, right? But you need to sometimes observe it and tweak it, right? That didn't work as well as I expected. Let me try something else. And again, there are examples of that. Core principle number 3, programming isn't personality. And this is, again, one of the foundations of the research and the work that I did to develop Acumatch and behavior intelligence, because we've had so many tools in the 1900s that have caused us to believe that people were fixed. And neuroscience has taught us that we are not fixed, okay? And so we've developed all of these tools that label people. You are a procrastinator, or, you're a control freak, or, this person has high resistance to change, or, they're going to kibosh every idea. So all of these things or words are causing us to say this person is like that. They are fixed. And that's incorrect. And today we know that behavior and neuroplasticity means that people are not fixed. It's not personality. Their program is something that they've learned. If I go back to the first slide, okay, everything that we do, we've learned how to do, because we can't read minds. We can only observe behavior, and when we practice a behavior, we get feedback that reinforces that behavior. It becomes our unconscious pattern, our unconscious habit. So to break people out of that, it's actually quite simple. You can, in this case, you can introduce a new routine, right? The routine needs adjusting so that that person can follow a different procedure. Right? Maybe the delegation loop has a trust gap. We need to work on the trust part. The lack of rewards are clear. So, if I go back to that previous slide, right? So rewarding change, or the control freak, doesn't trust people. So you can align those two slides together. Why this matters? Well, first, when you start shifting from personality to programs, you can identify programs that can change, you can reframe, you can do all kinds of things. And that removes the blame, oh, that's not my responsibility. When people say that, they're actually saying it's somebody else's responsibility. They're blaming somebody else. Or, I didn't know I should do that, or that was a misunderstanding. All of these patterns are programmed. They are not fixed patterns, okay? So you need to identify the cause or the system that's reinforcing those patterns and allowing them to happen, and you need to break those patterns. Mm-hmm. Principle number 4, right? If you want to shift, and I'm not sure I like the word identity, but let's work with it. It just implies too much fixed. But if we want to change how we are perceived, let's put it that way. So people observe us, they perceive us, they give you an identity. And identity is really something that you've observed over a period of time that repeats consistently with the same trigger every single time. So if we, see somebody, showing up early, and we see it, 30 times, 30 days in a row that happens, we start to say, oh, this person is really punctual, or, this person loves to be on time, right? Or loves to be early. Someone who asks questions all the time. Oh, this person is a curious person, right? Or curious leaders asking lots of questions. Gives credit, is a supportive one. So, the challenge that I'm proposing at the bottom of this slide is pick one keystone behavior tracker. Watch what happens with that. What's the identity that is associated with that, and if it can be shifted, how would you do that, right? So here's an example of one that you can try, right? If you want to, well, there's 3 examples, but if you want to have people attend on time, start the meeting early, yeah? Or start with wins every time, so that people want to come and are excited to do that. Daily check-ins, we do all of these things, by the way. So there is a huddle every morning where people share how they feel, what they're going to do, but it's very quick, 5 minutes. We don't use up half an hour or an hour chit-chatting. It's just a check-in, right? We call it a huddle. Weekly reflections. We do a weekly, what's one thing that you learned last week? Share that. Let's talk about that. Okay. Core principle number 5 is actually 3 parts. I'll just show you the 3 very quickly. It's about the environment. When you change the environment, and you can change it physically, digitally, or socially, okay? So what's physically? So environment shapes a lot of things. What is environment? Your workplace is an environment. Your culture is an environment. What you reward is part of the environment. So if you want to bring a shift to accelerate meetings, for instance, you can have a standing room meeting where people stand they'll get tired after 30 minutes, and you make faster decisions, and this has been proven to work effectively. The open floor plan, removing the barriers between people. Over time, at first, they're uncomfortable. Some people are loud, some people are not, but it takes care of itself, and it creates collaboration. Okay, but you got to watch that. We'll talk about that another time. Mood. People love windows, sun, things like that. These are physical things that you can do to change the environment, improve the environment, achieve different results through the physical environment. Then we get into the digital ones. So, we have, everyone's on Slack channels. We have our community portals. Calendar defaults is another technique that you can use. A lot of people don't understand that, but when you're not dealing with high demand response situations, what do you do with your time? That is your default for those time slots, so default calendar. Notification settings, reduce the constant notifications that are interrupting people, because there is a psychological impact of all those interruptions. When someone's in the zone and they get interrupted by a notification or a message, or somebody wants something, if you don't have that turned off, your brain has to stop what you were thinking about to deal with that, even if it's an instant. Then getting back to the zone of what you were thinking about takes time. You've just lost a huge amount of time. You've lost maybe focus, clarity, a lot of things. So managing those interrupts is important, notifications. And then the third one is the social influence. We're all human. When this has been proven, when people are isolated for long periods of time, they start to go nuts, basically, right? And so we need social interaction. We need the social recognition, the rewards, right? And so these are all environmental behaviors, right? So we've touched on a few core principles. We'll do one more, but design a environmental change. Right? So, for instance, removing friction is like making things easy. So make it simple for people to do the things that you want them to do and reward, right? So public celebration is critical. People like to be rewarded. But again, be careful, because we've seen the opposite effect of that on those that never get recognition. You need to identify something for everybody to celebrate, right? Feedback channels, make it one click, make it easy for people to participate in things that you want them to do. And the things that you want them to stop doing, make it hard, right? So, these are some simple examples, but, if interrupts are a problem, then make it hard for people to interrupt, okay? I use the do not disturb on my system quite frequently for these types of situations, so that only certain things will get through, and they better be important, right? So you can do things like that. So the environmental change is an important one. I spent a lot of slides on that, because we see the reshaping of people, organization, culture happen much more quickly with the right environment. So when you create the environment, it helps to take care of that. And the critical factors within the environment is really the reward and what gets recognized, right? Okay. Gentle nudges will fail. You need to be deliberate about what you're doing. So how do you change patterns? Well, I've touched on pattern interrupts. Okay. You need to interrupt it. It's like, most every morning I take my watch off and charge it, right? But there are some instances where, maybe there is something on the floor when I came down, or somebody, was there, asked me a question, interrupted my routine, and I forget to charge my watch. And hours later, I'm going, oh, I need to charge it. I forgot. It was an interrupt that broke the pattern. Right? It's an easy way to change things. In a lot of situations, interrupts have to be unique. What's the phrase I'm trying to think of? It needs to be sometimes so radical that they go, what? What are you talking about? Right? And that is a powerful interrupt. Pattern breaks, ritual disruptions, environmental shifts, role reversal. It's a great one, right? You can break someone's pattern just by putting them in a different role and putting someone else in their role. That's a really good way of doing that. I use the bell technique because I actually experienced this myself. It was a little bit different from what's explained on the screen, so I'll just share with you the example. Early in my career, I was brought in to bring together a project. It was a $40 million project with 5 different companies in different continents around the world working on a single project that was so far behind schedule. I think it was 6 to 8 months behind schedule, over budget, and we needed to bring it to a finish quickly. And the problem was communication. People were not really communicating because there were separate companies, there were silos, there was blame. And so I broke that cycle with a bell. Okay, we put up a bell in the office, and every time people communicated with another organization and solved the problem, we would ring the bell. People were running in from different parts of the company to figure out what this bell was about. And so that started to be the reward for people who wanted to go up. There were people that was just absolutely, I'm not ringing that bell, right? Until they saw what was happening, the energy, the momentum that was created from that. We brought this in on schedule and completed that project finally within the allocated overtime that was given to us to finish that. So that's a simple tool. There's many things that we've heard of over the years. I've seen executives use a groundhog in meetings, and when somebody is regurgitating a problem that's been discussed before and has been solved, and they still bring it up, the groundhog gets thrown at that person. We've seen the handing the baton, if you like. You're only allowed to speak when you have that. So there's all kinds of tools that you can use to help you improve that, right? So why this works, it's a stimulus, but you need the silence. So, if you imagine that situation, you have people running in from other places, everybody stopped and go, ooh, what happened? Who rang the bell? Why? Ooh, right? So there was a moment of collaboration, support, all kinds of energy, dopamine hits that were going on as a result of that. So you want to be able to do those kinds of things. So that was very early in my career. It was one of my first big projects. So it was exciting. Here are some case examples. So we've covered a number of points, and I'll do a recap in a moment. But the person that's late all the time, you need to interrupt that before the trigger happens. They probably have a pattern of what they're doing before a meeting, and we need to break that cycle in order for them to show up on time. This is maybe a better one, the crisis mode. Everything is last minute. People are known as human beings. We love to leave things to the last minute and jump in, and we end up having to do overtime because we didn't anticipate all the things that could go wrong and so forth. So you need to interrupt that and break the pattern, right? Okay. What else? Case 3, the annual reviews. Your review is coming up. So dump those reviews. Okay, they should just be so quickly. If the feedback and the discussions have been happening regularly, then you don't have to wait for a review to puke out all your frustrations on that person. That's not fair. That's not the right way to bring shift. That's the best way to lose good people. Okay, so improving satisfaction, churn, turnover, all of those phrases are part of that. So, as usual, I've covered a lot of things. I'm only about just past halfway. So let's wrap it up a little bit and let's talk about how you might implement some of these things. So you want daily practices, weekly practices, and monthly practices. And here are some tools to help you do that. It's your environment. You're responsible for shaping it as a leader. You are responsible for the individual's motivation, the culture, the team dynamics. All of those things are part of what you need to be aware of. Hence, leadership intelligence starts with behavior intelligence. Okay, so daily tools. Map the patterns. What triggers them? What's the outcome? What gets rewarded? Create a log, because if you don't track these things, we have a coaching app specifically, or leadership app specifically for tracking these things, so that we never ever lose sight of what was done, what was achieved, what wasn't done, and all of these types of things. Weekly huddles. Make sure that the agenda is clear about some of those behaviors. If you're working on tasks only, you're only really achieving 40% of the capability and capacity of your organization. If you want to get to 80%, you need to work on the people, the behaviors. You need to have meetings that are around the culture, the motivation, not just tasks. And you need to work on the monthly reviews, the checkpoints, and so forth. So you can take a snapshot of this slide and apply it in your business. Why this actually works? Well, it's neuroscience. Neural networks are myelinated in our brain like superhighways. Okay, but they only occur through repetition. Okay. Most of what we do is just automatic, unconscious trigger response actions. Okay. And the reason our brain does that is our brain actually is lazy. It wants to repeat stuff enough times so it can myelinate the highway and never have to consciously have to deal with that, because when we do something deliberately, consciously, it takes a lot more energy. When it becomes unconscious, it's far less energy oriented. So the brain does that without you realizing. So when you repeat something enough times, and you don't have to be doing that to yourself, you can actually do it with other people. You can actually create patterns with them, right, just by you disciplining yourself with that. So the habit loop is really recognizing that there is a technique to do that. I've been talking about reprogramming my brain. I've done it so many times in so many different situations where I've taken that and recognized the pattern, gone back, identify the trigger, right, and then introduce a interrupt so that I can actually practice a new pattern, and over time develop a reinforced pattern that is strengthened through repetition, reward, and so forth. So you've got to also either look at the outcome as a reward, yeah, look, I did that, or reward yourself for having done that so many times in a week, etc. This is the hack, right? Okay, if you want to change and transform your organization, it is not about transforming their mindset first. It's about changing the behaviors first, so that people start to value that. They start to believe in what the walking the talk, right? If you don't practice those things, you will not achieve the change that you're looking for. So map one pattern, right? Take one, right? And identify the pattern, okay, that causes you the most friction, right? Look, identify the trigger, the pattern, the outcome, and then decide, okay, what's the new pattern that you want to have? What environmental changes need to occur for that to start being practiced and being used? What's the interrupt strategy that you're going to use for that? And commit to that, right? And get everybody to commit to participating in that. And just like the bell, there were some people that were resistant. Don't worry. The environmental change will bring those people on board, okay? You need to believe in that. Okay, so trap. You can't eliminate past patterns completely. They're still there. They were built, they were enforced, and sometimes something will happen and they will fall back into that situation. That's okay. That's being human. Okay. So you're not going to eliminate them, but you can replace them with new ones because of the practice repetition. Right? Don't try to make too many changes. Just do one at a time. Okay. The environment is critical. Make sure you spend time on the environment, not just the individuals. Okay. Patterns are social, so involve people. Don't try to do it in isolation. It's going to be much harder to do that. So here's your 4-week cycle. And if I said earlier, this is a month's work on one pattern, okay? And imagine doing 12 patterns in a year, or even just 10. Take a break for December, August, whatever times you take off, right? Allow yourself to be human, I call it, okay? So if you achieve 10 things, measure the potential growth opportunity within your organization, the bottom line impact on your organization, the increase in customer satisfaction, all of these things, and all it takes is observe, design, implement, and refine, okay? So don't boil the ocean, like I said, just do one at a time. Conscious of my time, so I'll start wrapping up here. So some of the questions that you might be thinking about, right? Start with yourself, okay? contact us. We've got lots of assessments that you can access, or you can do the AccuMatch with one of us or one of our coaches in order to help you first understand yourself. When you start to reprogram yourself, you can more easily do that with your team and others. Make interrupts collaborative, right? Don't try to do it in isolation. It's harder. Just leverage the social aspects of this. Focus on the environment. That's important for it to stick. If the environment isn't supporting the change that you are looking to bring into play, then it will fall back to that level of what's being reinforced socially by the environment. Celebrate the small wins and be patient. It's a system, right? It's not a magic pill. Okay. So, your task, your homework, take one pattern, okay? Implement the environmental change. Test the interrupt that you're going to use and change that pattern. If you want to do the assessment, do reach out. I'm going to leave that contact information in a moment. Here it is there. If you want to do this in your organization as a workshop, do reach out. Let us know. If you're a coach, you want to do this with your clients, do talk to me, and we will help you with that. Okay. Join our community where I run multiple masterclasses, mastermind groups for that reason. You're welcome to reach out and join one of those. BIQ.network is our behavior intelligence network that we are launching to bring people together around these topics and these discussions. Next week, we jump into chapter 3 of part 2, and we will dive into the filters that distort what you see so that we can walk you through that. Some final thoughts, okay? Don't look at the problem, look at the pattern, okay? If you have friction, you have an issue, try to get away from the emotional trigger that you are feeling, that you are going through, and see the pattern that is triggering that, okay? Design it, work on it, work on it on yourself or with other people, and engineer it. So, mantra from this week: I am a behavior intelligence architect. I design the patterns that drive success within my organization. That's you. I hope you've enjoyed today's session. I look forward to seeing you next week. And this is a big part of the book. There's actually 6 or 7 chapters in this, so it will take a few weeks for us to complete that. So I hope you can join me on that journey. And again, reach out if you want to get in touch with me. Let me see if I can find that quickly. You can contact me. No, that's not it. Nagui at biqorg.com. I'm just not sure where that is. Could be this one. Yep, there we go. All right. And if you want to check some of the past events, recordings, they're all on the events page. And again, Nagui at biqorg.com. See you next week. Cheers.